Thank you, Delia, and thank you to everyone who has braved the pandemic and the monkeypox and whatever else you had to brave to get here. It's really wonderful to be in front of a live audience again. This is my first time in over 2 years. I've been in the Zoomosphere, as many of you probably have been, and I'm really excited to be here today and to engage with art with you. Now, in some ways, and don't tell the organizers of this event, I shouldn't be here because I don't really care much about Naked Ape NFTs. I don't care about art as commodity. I don't care how much art sells for at auction. I don't care about Van Gogh immersions. So there's much about the market. I just don't care about any of it. I also don't care that tomorrow Ida Robot is going to unveil her portrait of the Queen. She's the first robot artist who has painted a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. And it's kind of trippy. It looks like she's on acid. I can't show you the image because it's embargoed until tomorrow, but it'll probably be everywhere. It also looks like the Queen's face is kind of rotting. So it's a combination of an acid trip and psychedelia, and I don't know what else to call it. But it's not good, so there's no real reason for you to have to see it. But I'm sure it'll be out there. It'll be everywhere. But I am passionate about art. By the way, the name of that is Algorithm Queen. And I'm not a Luddite, but for me, really, and I think the reason that I'm here, why am I here? I think the reason I'm here is because, this is nice, I can see it from here. The reason I'm here is because of my book, but also I think because we're all here because of art. The law, the finance, everything else that goes around it is related to it, of course, but we're here because of art. And so I want to ground us a little bit at this beginning in what I think matters about art, what I'm passionate about, what drives me as a critic. Now, I was trained as a painter and practiced as a painter before I became a full-time critic. And I didn't study art history. I mean, I did in graduate school, but I wasn't an art historian. I wasn't a journalist. So I come to art specifically from a position of a practitioner. And so what I do as a critic, and surprisingly I have a job doing it, but what I do as a critic is to try to advance the same kinds of things that I also do in my book. And I gave you a little cheat sheet here. These are some of the major points in this book that I wanted to stress. One is that art is a language. It's a difficult language, as difficult as math, as music, as English. It's a difficult language to learn. And there are a lot of things that you have to learn in terms of fundamentals. And I really wanted to stress the fundamentals in the book about space, tension, metaphor, light, tension, rhythm, all kinds of things that have to be read, and that's why the subtitle of my book is How to Read Modern and Contemporary Art. But it's something that you have to invest in. It's not something that you do passively. It's something that you do passionately. It's also, I think, art is a living organism. It's something that's alive, that changes as you change, that as you come back to it and you're a different person, the art changes. So it's something that evolves with you as you evolve. And that's one of the great things about being able to see art and return to it throughout your entire lifetime. It means something different when you're 14 than when you're 21 than when you're 50. The other thing is that when you become fluent in the language of art, you can actually read any art from any era. Once you learn the language, it's like you can, if they're speaking English over here, you'll understand it, and if they're speaking it over here, you'll understand it. It doesn't matter when it was being spoken, who was speaking it, where. You start to understand this language. So it's a universal language. But also the art is in dialogue with other art, and I think that this is one of the major points that people don't get. That artists, when they're working, they're working in dialogue with past art. And artists from the future are working in dialogue with the artists who've already come before them. Picasso believed that the art of the Egyptians, of the Greeks, was possibly more alive today than it was during the period it was made. And art does get recycled. It goes out of fashion. It gets buried. Then it gets literally unearthed again. So artists don't think about art as existing on a timeline. Art is always alive. It's more like a spiral. You jump on at any given point, and then you jump off. It's not that this begot that. So art is always alive. The art of the past can open up the art of the present, and the art of the present can open up the art of the past. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, and I do in my book as well about some of those issues, and when I start to show some images. Also, I really wanted to empower people with the book, and I don't know if I did it or not, but to try to think like artists think, to trust their common sense, their guts, their minds, their groins, whatever you bring to the table, to be as subjective as you can be, to have the curiosity of a child, but the rationality of a scientist. So to bring both of those extremes, extreme subjectivity, the deepest subjectivity you can have, and also extreme objectivity, and to bring those things into a balance when you're looking at art. Don't trust the experts. Don't trust the wall labels. Don't trust the headsets. Don't trust anybody but yourself, okay? Sure, bring in some other ideas, but ask yourself, does this make sense? Do I like this? Do I care? Am I convinced by this? That's the important thing. The other thing I wanted to stress is that artists are often thought of as copyists, and they're doing mimetic stuff that the camera can do. But no, they're poets. And they're poets at the deepest level as poets who write poetry. So, art does the same thing as poetry. It works in metaphor. And I really do believe that artists are seers, they're visionaries, they're shamans. They still are the best ones. There are a lot who are sham artists, instead of actual artists, but that's also part of the art world. It's part of the whole dialogue that goes on in the larger scheme of things. I'm beginning with a painting on the left of the rape or abduction of the daughters of Leucippus from 1618, and the image on the right is a copy I did as a student from this drawing. Now, I'm showing this to give you a sense of myself as an artist and how I'm thinking about trying to understand what's going on in this Rubens painting. And of course, the best way to learn about art is to draw from it. It goes all the way back. The ancient Egyptians drew from other artists. That's the way you learn. That's how it's like a musician playing in a piece of music. You have to be in it. You have to feel it. You have to work through it before you understand the rhythms, everything that's going on. And for me, this really opened up a lot of metaphors for me in the painting that I hadn't seen before. Now, the painting itself is... It's a very weird painting, and it's very frontal, it's very stacked, it's almost like a brick wall. But then when you start looking at it, everything seems somewhat normalistic, okay? Normal, like, okay, natural, whatever. Except then you start to realize that there are a lot of confusions here, a lot of complexities, a lot of problems that could not happen and in real life. So you notice that, for instance, that this figure is coming out of the horse, that he's merged with the horse. You notice that the horses are too small. You notice that everything has a frontality and an immediacy that happens right up front to the plane of the canvas. So the space is very unnatural. And Rubens does this for us so that we get the sense of the immediacy of this thing. So he throws it all up against us. Then, as we're looking at it, we start to notice that he starts to turn things inside out so that he starts to tie the figures up. He starts to rotate them. If you look, this woman's arm is basically broken. Her back is basically broken. So she turns over here. She almost creates a kind of circular form. These horses' legs actually start to come forward too close to where her hand is, so that everything keeps advancing on us to give us this sense of the violence and what's going on in this thing. As he's also turning all the forms like tornadoes. I mean, he's a great painter. But the other thing that I noticed finally when I was drawing from it was that this particular area right here was the most peculiar in the painting. And this is a rape. This is an abduction of these two women. We've got gods and mortals coming together here. And Rubens gives, for instance, this figure's face the quality of, oh, take me away, sure, I'll go, whatever. But he also, so he gives a certain kind of levity on that side of it. I'm not saying he's making light of the rape, but he also is very clear about the fact that this is a violent act. And what he does is to tear this woman apart here, where her hip is against where this leg is. and that he forces this leg in and rotates this leg over so that it's as if this leg is farther back than this leg, so that he rotates her in the space like this as he pulls her apart like a wishbone. And it was something, that was where I got this sense of like, oh, Rubens is trying to give us a whole range of experience in this. He's not just giving us one idea. And then here's a place in which I'd like to say that this painting helped me to understand a later painting. This is by Sonia Delaunay over here from 1967. It's called Rhythm Color. And I specifically want you to focus, I mean, it's a childlike painting. One of the things that she does that's so, it makes it look like actually she doesn't know how to color to the lines. It looks like she's a bad colorist. But what she does in leaving all these white edges here is to emphasize the ground white as always being the most frontal point. So it's the farthest back thing, it's the starting place, and it's also the ending place, so that she collapses the space completely. It's a very sophisticated painting. And she also puts it into a kind of state of where nothing actually ever comes together. I feel like, it never quite gets to complete itself. You have a pure primary red, but you don't really have a primary blue. You have white and black, but then you have green and a greenish yellow and a light blue. And then what she does here, I think, is similar to what happens here, where at this point where these two blues shift off each other, it's like a seismic shift, and that these two blacks, this one seemingly a little bit behind, and this one maybe a little bit in front, but also they seem to be on the same plane, where they try to reach each other this way in the space, and also to combine this way, so that she does this spatial shift here, this tension, this torsion in the space, where things keep trying to come together. I remember the first time I saw this painting, I'd had a fight with my wife the night before, or maybe it was my girlfriend at the time. Anyway, and I remember us being in bed together, and that space at night where you're both, never go to sleep angry, but we're right next to each other in bed. But you feel that space between you, that tension that's like as wide as the Grand Canyon. And that's how I felt about this space in here, that you're so close and yet you're completely separated. And I think that metaphorically, that's one of the great moves in this painting. Two other works from different times. They're separated by 800 years. Giselbertus on the top, this is from the Cathedral of Saint-Lazare d'Autun in France, of Eve. And then below is from Alberto Giacometti from 1929. What's the name of it? Reclining Woman Who Dreams. And I want to talk about these two roughly because I want to really kind of press a little bit more the idea of metaphor here. And that is that these two artists are both working metaphorically. They're working with representational figures. This is the top piece is somewhat naturalistic. This is considered surrealist, and I apologize, it's a little out of focus. But in this, Giselbertus is not saying that he's got a naturalistic, somewhat nude figure of Eve here. But he's also saying that she's Eve, but she's also a snake. And I think that she moves through the space like a snake. He's saying that she is both things. So he fuses these two different identities together so that it's not just one thing or the other. So he also makes her, though, fruit on the tree here as a body and also as her breasts. He creates her, it's as if she's kind of swimming through. He gives her hand here a mouth-like grip, a snake-like grip on the fruit. And then he makes her hair into a kind of wateriness, So he floats her through there as if she is a dream, in a sense. And Giacometti, I think, is doing similar things, thinking similarly here in this figurative kind of abstract, somewhat surreal kind of conflation here of what? It's really all about what do you see? So is it a bed with 4 leg posts? Is it an animal? Is it 2 figures making love? Is it a dream? Is it water? Is it a trap that's been set? Does this involve some kind of sexual penetration or something? Is this an oar? Is this a spoon? Is this a head? So is this the dream itself? Or is this the motion of the dream? Is it a fantasy? But he's never saying that it's any of these things. It is all of these things simultaneously. In the same way that Giselbertus is saying that that she is many things simultaneously, not one thing. It's just opens us up to many different questions about her. Most of you probably recognize the Pollock on the top. It's Autumn Rhythm, number 30 from 1950. The work below it is a piece from the part of the 1,000-character essay in cursive script from the 12th century, a Chinese kind of child's primer. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the ways in which these two things, I'm not saying that this influenced this, but what I am saying is that the language of this is the language of this, okay? I'm not saying that Pollock was really, really seriously influenced by Asian calligraphy. What I'm saying is that the dynamics that happen in this, the importance of what happens in this, the process of what this artist is doing is also similar to what Pollock is doing. In Chinese calligraphy, which is the highest art form in China, you start with an imaginary grid for each character. Now, there are no such things as nouns in Chinese characters. There are only verbs because there's motion in things and things in motion. So, for instance, the character for man is 2 legs walking. Okay, the character for dawn is a sun in tension with the horizon line. And it's really about, those two things have to be in tension for the character to work. The character for sees is an eye with a pupil in it on legs. Because when you see, you're in motion, you're looking at something, okay? It's about verbal communication, it's about verbal interaction, things in motion, motion in things. And I think people would also be surprised that Pollock, in the same way that the calligraphers and also that Renaissance artists laid out a grid on large works, on large paintings to try to figure out exactly where things were going to fall, that Pollock also did this. He drew a grid on his large canvases before he started flinging paint so that he could actually, he wasn't just out there, whip-de-do-de-da, okay? He was in there trying to find out what was the relationship of this rectangle to how this flung piece of paint would hit against this, against that, so that he could always keep track of the entire frame around the thing. And the other important thing about Chinese calligraphy, which is also true of Pollock, is that it has to have a frontal presence. It has to come to you. It can't sit back. So the characters have to be, they have to have a power of communication, not just in what they say, in how they relate, and what the symbols are, and what the pictographs are, but they have to actually have the dynamic life of something that comes to you. Okay, in the same way that somebody greets you with his eyes in a conversation. So this is one of the things that Pollock does in his best work, and that is as he's lassoing all of this paint, and as he's spinning it together, the denser it becomes, the more open it becomes, so that he creates a space that does this. As it collapses, it's elastic, so that it starts to do this kind of it does become this kind of movement that advances on you, and it also ties itself up, but it also advances back in space too, so that it doesn't just sit there. So their lines become spatial arabesques, meaning that they actually move in space. They go across the plane this way, horizontally, okay, perpendicularly to you, but then they seem to move this way in the space. Now, I'm a firm believer in just starting with what you know, always. To look for the familiar when you're looking at art, not for, the thing that, I'm going to get tripped up, where am I going in here? This is a sculpture by Jean Arp called Star from 1939. And I'm showing it next to a starfish just because it's like, there's that association. And I think that this is one of the most important things. What does it evoke? What associations am I getting? Where is he taking me? What is the poetic entryway he's giving me into the work? But I also think he's suggesting that maybe it's a ballerina on point too. And I'm just throwing these things out here. I'm not saying that this is like you're damn right. That's what ARP wanted. Yeah, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that this is where my mind goes when I look at this, and that's all that you have to do is to go where you go. And if the metaphor's there, if you're taken there, if ARP takes you there, then it was there. Okay. It's intentional, all right? He knows that, yes, it's going to look like somebody on one leg. It's going to look like a dancer. Again, what do you know, okay? What do you see? Where does it take you? This is another ARP sculpture. It's called Growth, and it's from 1938. It's about 3 feet high. I'm showing you two views of it, one in color, one in black and white on both sides here. In the middle is a femur, a human femur, okay? I'm showing you this because I want you to start thinking about it, certainly with ARP sometimes and with abstract sculpture. It's like you want to name it, but you have to get away from that idea of needing to name anything. But you are taken to places that you have to acknowledge and read through. And I certainly think that ARP is using some of these ideas when he's making a sculpture that looks like a bone, a horn, a breast, buttocks, human limbs. It changes from one to the other. But he's also telling you that it could be the inside of the thing or it could be the outside of the thing. When I look at ARP sculptures, I often think of them as like, it's like if somebody has a bunch of marbles in his mouth and they're all moving around in your cheeks, kind of like, and because it seems as if the sculpture is actually moving with you, changing, growing, it's elastic. So it becomes inside and outside, but also sometimes it's as light as a cloud too. And I'm showing you these two different views because it certainly gives you different, as you walk around it, it changes really in major, major ways. There's also a phallic form in the bone, which of course is also in the sculpture itself. So there are many different ways in which you feel like, oh, it's shifting from this. No, now it's that. Oh, wait, no, now it's that. And you kind of almost can't keep up with the way things flit around, with the associations, the evocations. But of course, he's making other analogies too. The Roman copy of a Grecian sculpture, a Hellenistic sculpture from 100 BC on this side, and then a Michelangelo dying slave on the right. I think that ARP is probably one of the greatest sculptors of the 20th century. Nobody's as good as Michelangelo, right? But whatever. I do think that there's a lot of the same kinds of things going on in both of these sculptures, or in all three of these sculptures, and the analogies that he's pulling together here, especially in terms of the torsion. And one of the things I thought about with this sculpture, it's this whole thing, you almost feel like the bottom half of the sculpture is giving birth to the top half in ARP sculpture. And I was talking about this in a class once, and a student said, oh yeah, it reminds me of giving birth. And I said, well, in what way? She talked about the tension of the top to the bottom, and she said, well, if you want to know what it feels like to give birth, take your top lip and pull it over the back of your head, and take your bottom lip and pull it down over your knees. And she said, this is what this sculpture reminds me of in terms of one form, violently kind of, because growth is a violent thing, right? Death happens with growth, and something has to go and shift. And there is that sense of that torsion in the middle there, that wrenching in the space and in the sculpture. Also going to show this next to, I thought of this when I first saw this Titian painting in the Ferrari Chapel in Venice. This is like a 17-foot high painting done when Titian was young, but of the Assumption of the Virgin. And I want to talk about the combinations, the similarities in these two works, because I think that there's a lot that goes on between bottom and top here, and especially in the way that this happens. that you go zigzagging in, back, and in again. And you've got God up here, which is like a bird of prey. And then you've got her with this expression on her face that's like, I don't know. It reminds me a little bit of watching a cheerleader, being thrown up in the air and doing flips. And then that moment before the cheerleader is caught, when you have that tension of what's going to happen. Is she going to be caught? Is she going to be hurt? But the difference between this space and this space up here, and that this can't get there, and yet it's almost there. It's just touching. And that then she rotates here in the center. The assumption of the virgin tradition is telling us is not any small potatoes, okay? This is a big deal. And we have to understand that she has to go through these contortions to be able to do it. If we don't, then it's just a woman, a woman flying is something, certainly. But it's just a woman going up. But it's almost as if he inverts her here, as if God is going to catch her. There's this sense that she's going to go like this in the space as she goes up. There's a quality of like, I have to go through some kind of metaphoric weird realm of shifting and twisting before I can get up here. It's Robert Gober's Untitled Leg. I'm just going to run through some things here. Jericho's studies for the Raft of Medusa, Van Gogh's shoes, Merritt Oppenheim's breakfast in fur. A magic trick, practical joke, Dwayne Hansen, The Wicked Witch of the East. Or this sculpture in the right. This sculpture here, which is man coming out of woman, which I think kind of combines this Magritte painting with this Courbet painting. I mean, I prefer the Courbet, but anyway, something. I'd like to end by comparing a Mondrian to something that I experienced in Egypt, and that is that I wanted to talk a little bit about the nature of this painting and how the sense of it really as one of those simplest paintings that there is, but also the nature of it as doing the most with the least amount. Some things that happen with this painting is that it pulls you this way and this way. It also pulls you this way and this way. This, because even though it's the same weight as this, seems to move more slowly than this. There's also a quality then of kind of getting lost in the center here of all this white. And there's also the sense of this form here as having kind of like spun and then being hammered down in to this point, and then being hit by the point of this blue, which is like a flowering. So there's the quality also of everything coming forward, but everything being embedded. And it's extremely dynamic, but also extremely arrested. And I do think it's like Egyptian art in that it's this arresting in the plane, where it's almost the potential for movement, and it is movement, but your eyes have to go through this movement to get there. I had this similar experience of the Mondrian when I was in Egypt, standing at the foot of the pyramids, of the Great Pyramid. But any of them will do. But this, because it's 450 feet high and 750 feet across, I had that same experience, that abstract experience in front of the pyramid that I had in front of Mondrian, which is that the pyramids demand that you face them frontally, that you go to the center of the base, and they just demand this of you. You can't just stand to the side. It's just like you're being disrespectful to them. They're just like, okay, you go over and you face it right at the center, and then it pulls you this way to the ends. You have that sense of the peripheral, but it also pulls you to the peak, like a catapult, like you're being launched like a rocket. But then because it also folds in, because it's at an angle, it gives you that sense of a free fall. So you have the sense of going this way, and then going this way. So it's as if you're standing at a precipice of something where you would fall upward. And if you think about the fact that originally these pyramids were sheathed in white limestone, and they'd be reflecting the light. It gives you that was one of the things that I thought about when I was thinking that, oh, the Mondrian and the pyramid both would have given you that same kind of lost in the white, that same experience of kind of free-floating in this very abstract space. Thank you. I think I have time for maybe one or two questions, if anyone has any questions, comments. Yes?
Just very curious, what do you think is the most unusual art you've ever seen, and what made it stand out for you?
The most unusual? I don't know, unusual. I would say, I think that probably Las Meninas is one of the most profound experiences I've ever had in my life. I think it's arguably probably the greatest painting that's ever been made. But I would also say, in terms of something unusual, and I'm talking about Velázquez's painting, but in the Prado. But I would say that the experience in front of the pyramids was a pretty major mind buckler. You have to go to any culture to experience the art there. I think you need to eat the bread, drink the wine, walk the streets, experience the light, meet the people, understand the diet. You need to do that with any culture. But Egypt, even though there's really no connection to current Egypt, to ancient Egypt, still going there and seeing how the culture is, I would say that was probably one of the wildest or most unusual experiences to see it in situ. Yes.
Is there any current form of art that you've observed that has my experience that challenges you to bring both the subjectivity and the objectivity?
Well, I think everything, yes. I just go there with those tools, it's like, here's my hammer and here's my, I think that those are the things you're developing constantly, and that you have to get rid of your prejudice, you have to be as subjective, but also as objective. And the whole point of this is that hopefully, according to Clement Greenberg, it's a theory, but he's saying that you then arrive at the position of being every man, in a sense, okay? You get to a point of objectivity where you've leveled the playing field, where you have used your deepest experience personally to arrive at a place that other people can't have arrived, where they meet you. Yes?
What would you make of something like John Muir talking about temples not built by human hands? Is that art?
What are you referring to specifically?
Well, nature.
Oh, nature. Yeah, I think that. I think that for me, art is not made by a ultra-realistic robot, and it's also not made by a monkey, and it's made by human beings. Yeah, I think that's something that I would keep as a distinction that I would hold on to. Now, I'm a traditionalist, but I think nature is fantastic, but we're part of nature too. So, and as Paul Klee would say, I am my own God. As Matisse said, I am God. I'm an extension of God. And it's not being. There's humbleness in that, saying like I'm an extension of the larger idea of creation. But nature is a different thing. Even though the structures are similar in art and nature, that's I think that's a separate idea. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.